Hi guys, it's Sam, and if you're new here, welcome. This is going to be my March and April reading wrap up. I haven't done some really long reviews in a while, and so I thought it'd be good to catch you guys up on everything I read in those 2 months. I read a total of 19 books, and a lot of them have become some of my new all-time favorite books, so I'm excited to talk through them. Let's get straight into it. Starting off with a series that has the potential to become one of my new favorite series of all time, that is the Mistborn trilogy. I have read book 1 in March and book 2 in April, so I'm just going to give a non-spoilery review of both of these two books together. So to start off by saying that if you've been putting off this series because you're intimidated by the size, you're intimidated by the fact that it's epic fantasy, if you think that the whole Cosmere universe that Brandon Sanderson has created seems kind of intimidating as well, just know that actually these are some of the most accessible books in the fantasy space that I've read. I was so shocked going into it because immediately it had a really good strong cast of characters. The world was not spoon-fed to you, but it was explained in such a way that everything was making sense, it was going along, and there never felt like there was info dumping, but there was enough in the world building to keep you intrigued and wanting to find out more. The premise of Mistborn, to keep it simple, is that there are people in this world who can burn metals. So they ingest metals which can either be in the water or actually like clumps of metal, and depending on the metal, when they burn it inside of them, it will create some sort of power. So if you burn pewter, it will make you stronger. If you burn tin, it will enhance your senses. If you burn steel, then you can push against objects. If you burn iron, then you can pull on objects. So there are people who can burn at least one metal who are mist things, but if you can burn 2 or more metals, then you are considered a Mistborn, and you are pretty rare if you are Mistborn, and you can be very powerful because basically you've got the whole rainbow of metals and abilities to be able to harness. And we follow our main character Vin. She's a young girl, she's with a motley crew who are trying to do dodgy deals in the city and try and take advantage of people as a criminal gang. Then we have Kelsia, who one day finds Vin and takes her under his wing. He has created this crew that he dreams will overthrow the Lord Ruler, and a lot of this book is all set in one location called Lutherdale, which is ruled by the Lord Ruler, and a lot of the people there are unhappy and want an overhaul. Basically, they don't think that he's a good ruler and he's not putting the people first, so they're like, he's gotta go. So Kelsia has this crew of people with specific skills that he gets together to try and implement this plan of how exactly they're going to defeat the Lord Ruler, someone who is apparently immortal and very mysterious, this Lord Ruler figure. You don't learn that much about him apart from little whispers and little nuggets of information until the story really gets going. So those are the main bones of the story to hook you in. I would say this book felt like Six of Crows a little bit, if you've read that, by Leigh Bardugo, in terms of this group of like misfits who all come together to do heists. It kind of felt like that in terms of the vibe, and with the city of Lutherdale setting as well, felt a bit like Ketterdam. There are so many layers to the story. The world itself is so interesting. There's so many different layers to it. You learn about the creatures that exist in this world. You learn that there's a problem with mists appearing and them killing people. You learn about how there's always ash falling from the sky in this world and the sun is always red. Why? There's so many things that are told to you about the world that you don't question for a little bit, and then actually it all starts piecing together, all the moving parts that I'm sure are going to lead into some really big reveals. Like I said, I have finished the first 2 and I've got 1 more book to go, and I'm trying to film a spoilery reading vlog for that so I can get all of my thoughts out as I'm reading it. So far, these 2 books, I can't believe I put them off for so long, like I said, and the characters are so compelling. I love this gang who you get to know so intimately throughout the books. I really didn't expect these books to be so character driven. The way the first book completely got me in the feels, like I was not expecting what happened at the end of Mistborn to happen. And there are characters in here who are more side characters but actually have become the rulers of my heart. For instance, Sazed, he is a terraceman and he is a keeper of knowledge, and when you read it, he's one of my favorite characters. I don't want to give away about anything that Sazed can do or the terrace people, because I think those are some of the most exciting things to learn about as you read the book. So if you want to try and read these, I would so recommend it. My only complaint actually is that the layout of this book, I don't know why, but it's just, to me, I didn't really like how this book was laid out. There's no margin and it really bothered me, but then for some reason in book 2 it sorted itself out. I don't know if you know what I mean, but that is actually one of my only complaints. So the first book I gave 4.25 stars and the second book I gave 5 stars, and I think it's feeling like Hero of Ages is going to be another 5-star, but I will be updating you in May. I'm going to finish it in May and then I'll decide what route to take with the Cosmo universe, because you can start off with the Mistborn series as an easy entry point into Brandon Sanderson's works, and then there are different ways you can start to get into the other series and then read some of the standalones. So I will be bringing you guys along with me on that journey, but just know these were so good and they're so thick, but while you're reading them they don't feel long because you're just enjoying them so much. Another standout book for March was Across the Vanishing Sky by Catherine Cowles. I loved this so much. I think it was just such a nice change of pace from everything else I was reading that was deep in the fantasy space or fantasy romance. This was so refreshing, so romantic, and just kept me on the edge of my seat. I have read a couple of other Catherine Cowles books in her other series. I think it's called Sparrow Falls, but this is the start of a new series called Starlight Grove, and I don't think you have to have read those other books to read this. You can read this on its own, and in fact I would probably just say just get into this one because I think this is one of her best books, and also the sequel is out in July, so it's just perfect timing. It just has one character who you meet in Sparrow Falls vaguely. He's in the background and he's taking center stage in this book. So what do you need to know going into it? Catherine Cowles writes romantic suspense, which means it's romance, but there's a little bit of intrigue, there's a little bit of mystery, there's a little bit of, oh, is she gonna die? Oh, she's being stalked. In this one we follow Braden, and she goes on a road trip with her friend Nova, and her friend just disappears while they're on this road trip. The police aren't really too helpful, and so a year later Braden is still trying to find out where her friend is, what happened to her, why was she even taken, if she was even taken at all. So she decides to move back to the town where her friend Nova was taken to find out more and just be on the ground. And while she's there she accidentally ends up living next to Dex, who is an ex-FBI agent. How convenient. And I know sometimes people don't like convenient stories, but that is just the perfect recipe for me. So he decides that he is going to help her and enlist the help of his family as well. And the key thing to know about his family is that he is one of 5 brothers. They all have their own special brand of trauma due to the fact that their dad was a serial killer. So they have all banded together to form this group which helps people who need some legal assistance in terms of hunting people down, tracking people down, finding missing people, things like that. And they do all of that anonymously because they don't want to draw attention to themselves. So it's a big risk for them to take on Braden's work because they don't want any attention on them from the media. And obviously while this is all unfolding, Braden and Dex have a connection, and that's kind of where the romance comes from. And then there's also an added element of Braden having a young son, and that also adds some really nice scenes where Dex and him have really nice bonding moments and almost like a father figure that he's never had. If you've read other romance books like Chestnut Springs and Silver Pines Ranch, where there is a love interest with a child trope, I don't know, it's not really a trope, but you know what I mean, it's setup of it, where the characters are going to have to interact with the other person's child and also make a good impression on them. It all adds to a really sweet, wholesome moment, and I love that here. I think it was done so well. Where this book ends, I shed a tear, and I wasn't expecting to shed tears because I was reading it, I was having a silly goofy time where she got, let's find Nova, let's get it on. It had an emotional punch I was not expecting at all, and it meant that the next book, which is about a different brother, is going to be so good. I'm predicting now that I'm going to love them more and more as they go. This book does a really good job at setting up each of the brothers' characters and their potential love stories, that being the key. I already think I know all of their love stories, or at least who their love interests are going to be. I already know what problems they have, and I already know the potential emotional impact moments that are going to come out of it. Into the Fading Twilight, which is book 2, comes out in July, like I said, and I am going to read it as soon as I can get my hands on a copy. But just know I love this. I think it's a really nice change of pace if you enjoy romance but you want something a little bit more interesting going on. I think this one is perfect. I gave this one 4.5 stars, but actually every time I talk about it I'm so passionate. It really really should just be a 5-star. On the same vein as the last book of it being a romance and a thriller, this one is called This Story Might Save Your Life by Tiffany Crumb, and I really like this. It's also a story that straddles different genres, so it at times felt like a romance, sometimes a thriller, sometimes a mystery. It really worked for me. So this is about two best friends who have a survival podcast together, which is called This Story Might Save Your Life. It's a comedy survival podcast. They have been doing this for a while. It's going really well, until one day Benny comes over to Joy's house to record with her, and Joy isn't there. He ends up being one of the main suspects in her disappearance. So we get the present timeline told through Benny's point of view, and we get flashbacks from Joy in a memoir that she was writing. So it has these two timelines told in two different ways that really made the story feel so whole and so compelling, because I wanted to get back to Joy's timeline to see how Bella and Benny met. Why didn't they get together? Because in present day they're with two different people and it's kind of messy. Then you get all of this yearning and the self-hatred from Benny. He just wants to find Joy, and he knew that he should be doing more for her. It was such a good, well-rounded story, and I couldn't put it down. So I ended up giving this one 4.25 stars. I think there were parts about it that could have had more of an emotional punch. It wasn't that shocking to me. It more read like a drama than it did a thriller at times. I was hooked on the mystery. I think if you're someone who likes lit fic with a little romance, with a little drama, with a little mystery element to it, because where is Joy? We need to find Joy. And the twists were good. I just wouldn't say they were jaw-dropping twists or really clever or anything like that. It was just really entertaining and I couldn't put it down. I would recommend this. I think it would have been perfect to read on a flight. This would be the perfect book to read for that. Instead, I was kind of reading this on like a lazy Sunday. I wish I read this on a flight, because I would have been tearing up through the pages and I wouldn't have been able to put it down. So definitely have this one on your radar if you like what I've described. Another book that has become one of my favorites of all time is Men Back by Ella Lee. I already knew I liked Ella Lee's writing because I loved her book Jaded, which goes into sexual assault in the workplace, the ways in which we let women down in terms of the support and believing their stories. It was just such a beautifully done book. Also with this protagonist who's half Turkish, half Korean, and how her mixed identity played into how she handled the aftermath of the situation, but also the support that was available to her in terms of like culturally what her parents might have thought had happened to her. And I really love the way that it showed immigrant parents and parents from different countries who were raised in a different environment and show care to you in a different way that you might not see in the Western world. I thought it was so brilliantly done, and I think everyone needs to read that book. But this one was brilliant. I thought this was really smart. I thought this had a quality about it that I just could not put this book down, because I needed to find out what the big secret was. It's a generational story with the grandmother, mother and daughter, and we flip between two timelines, 1985 South Korea and 2008 London, and we get this grandmother and mother in South Korea, how they grew up against the backdrop of a really unsettled political climate, corruption and uprising, juxtaposed with the daughter who is Korean English, and you slowly learn about their lives, their relationship, and what led up to the mother moving to the UK in the first place. And in present day, when the three of them are all forced to share a room in their house, which they've made into a boarding house called a minbag, that is when the secret that has been festering for so many years starts to threaten to come out. And that was the best part of this book, the fact that you can really feel the claustrophobic nature of this room, of this secret that is stifling all of the air from this family when they are in survival mode. We've got Youngja, the grandmother, who has dementia, and it's really heartbreaking how it's depicted, how her memories come to her in flashes, how difficult it is for the people around someone with dementia to help care for them when there's such an emotional burden, right? Like, you're someone who is your mum and they only remember you occasionally. That is heartbreaking. And then we've got Hannah, who's a daughter of Youngja, and I found her character really, really interesting. She comes off as a bit cold. There obviously is an element where you're reading about her through the lens of her daughter Ada, and it really feels throughout the book that whatever secret that she's been keeping is affecting her all the way up till now, even though it's been, 20-30 years later. Then we've got Ada, who is the youngest. She's half English, half Korean, and she really struggles at school sometimes in this privileged area. We have the daughter Ada, who is half Korean, half English, growing up in this very affluent area with her friends all from like middle class backgrounds who have seemingly stable families and everything that they could ever want, and she comes home and she feels so isolated because her mum can't understand her experiences in the Western world, and she's just lost her father at the beginning of this book, who was her only tie to the English culture in a way. He was the one who understood what schooling would be like, what her life would actually be like. And then she also has all of these complicated feelings around how her mother is actually her only link to Korea. I really enjoy reading about the mixed experience in general. I think there are so many people who grow up with mixed heritage who don't feel like they're enough for one side or enough for the other side, or too much for one side and not enough for the other side, something along those lines. I think that Ella Lee is so good at writing that experience in her characters. It makes me feel so seen as someone who has grown up mixed and grown up in 2 countries. I would so recommend this for a lot of people. There's a part where Ada looks at her grandmother and thinks to herself, how does she know so much about all of these Western wars, yet not the one that her grandmother lived through, yet not the one that her grandmother experienced every single day in South Korea. I thought that that was so poignant in a way, because I was like, damn. That really hit me when I read it. I think when you don't grow up in the culture that half of you is from, you're always gonna feel like a little part of you is missing. But then when you look at the people closest to you and you think, I don't know about the things that have made up the biggest parts of your life. I find myself when I go to see my grandma in Thailand asking her as many questions as possible, because I'm trying to find, I suppose, that closeness to her experience and to the culture that I haven't been exposed to. And that's for a therapy session for another day. I gave this book 5 stars. I don't know if you can tell. And throughout this whole story, which I really enjoyed learning about that I didn't know, is that a lot of South Korean children that were given up to adoption houses or orphanages. This was all actually part of a wider corrupt system of those children being kind of pipelined to adoption centers in America. This is all based off real research that the author did, and it's something that I actually really want to read up on, because I'm sure that there are still those dodgy avenues that are happening today. But to read about it in this book was really interesting and eye-opening, and something I didn't expect to take away from it, but actually is a small part of history that I'd really like to look into. Overall, this book really made me want to call my mum, call my grandma, hug them close, thank them for everything they've been through, and also just like everything that they've given me. I think the story is super powerful, and I would love to see more people reading this. I read And Now Back to You by B.K. Borison. I gave this book 5 stars, baby. And this one was so good. B.K. Borison just knows how to write a tender yet very humour-filled love story. If you've read First Time Caller, then I think you'll enjoy this. I know some people who love this one more than First Time Caller. Me, but I know some people who thought that First Time Caller was better than this one, so I don't know. I guess it's just all up to interpretation and what you enjoy out of your romances, I suppose. This one, what really stood out for me is that there's these 2 characters who've always felt like they're either too much or not enough in areas of their lives, but when they come together, they're enough for each other and they're accepted just the way they are. So we've got both of them who are weather reporters, and they're kind of like from 2 different stations, and to boost views they've been put together and they're forced to go and report on this snowstorm which is coming. Of course that leads to some very like forced proximity moments. Oh no, we're snowed in. We've got Delilah, who is super clumsy. She's described as like a whirlwind, Hurricane Delilah, and she comes in on this very first day, runs straight into Jackson, knocks him over, his coffee's all over himself. Jackson is someone who likes order. He likes a list. He likes to know what he's going to be doing it. Like, he wants order in his life that he has never had, because when he was growing up his mum was very flighty, and that meant that he had to look after his sibling, and he has had that responsibility on his shoulders from such a young age. It has really like stuck with him into his adulthood that he likes to be on the straight and narrow. And when they're put together, obviously it's aggravating at first, but when they come together it is just magic. magic. These two really pulled on my heartstrings. I can't wait to reread this actually, because I feel like I kind of inhaled it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is just so romantic, so beautiful, that I really want to see them again, because their love story was truly so tender. There were parts about Jackson that really spoke to me. I think feeling like you have a lot on your shoulders, feeling like you have a lot of responsibility for your family, I just completely get that, and it was really nice to see that on the page. I think the closest that I've read to that recently was The Night We Met by Abby Jimenez, with our main character Larissa, who's like this ultimate hustler, and she has to try and provide for her family. She has to try and plug up debts. She's trying to make a better future for herself with the limited tools that she's been given in her life. And I feel like those two characters actually for me are on the same level in terms of like, oh my babies, my heart, like you deserve happiness, do you know what I mean? So I would read this again. I love that it was set against this wintry backdrop of this snowstorm, and it was just it was really sweet. I really like the setup of these books. So the first they're like two radio hosts on a show about love. This one, they're two weather reporters, and there is going to be a third book called Long Time Listener, something like that. Super excited for this to keep going. I think BK Borison just has her pulse on romance, and especially tender love stories. She's up there for me with Emily Henry, with Ashley Poston, Talia Hibbert, like some of the greats, and I can't wait to read more from her. She's also got another book coming out this year called Grim Tidings, which is the sequel to Good Spirits. So if you want something with a little bit more of a paranormal element, go for those, because Good Spirits has a ghost and Grim Tidings, which is coming out, is about reapers, and that is completely what I'm looking for. 5 stars, would recommend. If you haven't read BK Borison, read First Time Caller and then read this one, and let me know what you think and how you would rank them. I don't know how I've just got to this one. Weavingshaw by Habao City, one of my favorite books once again of 2026. This was such an unexpected surprise in terms of like the punch packed. I read the blurb, didn't really get it, but started the story and I was like, oh, this is what it's about, this is what it's doing, I love this. So when I went into it, I knew that it was a gothic romance, I knew that there was some kind of bargain, and there was like a manor called Weavingshaw, and I was like, yeah, that sounds good. Like, I've read Belladonna by Adeline Grace, I love that kind of thing. It's all set in one location, like has a gothic vibe, very atmospheric. Yeah, let me pick it up. What I wasn't expecting from this is that the main character was going to be so compelling, and I loved Lena, I loved her so much, and Saint Silas in a chokehold. Like, every scene of him I was like, yes sir. So the premise of this story is that Lena's brother is ill, and the only way that she can save him is by trying to bargain for some kind of medicine to heal him. And Saint Silas has been known to make these kinds of bargains with people, but at a cost. So she goes to make this bargain with him to save her brother, and he's like, oh, what have you got to give me? And she's like, I've got a secret, and the secret is that she can see ghosts. And little does she know that's actually going to be the most useful quality that she could have said to him, because he's in need of finding a specific ghost for his own purpose, right? She's made this bargain and she's tied herself to Saint Silas. Oh, a premise to steal my heart. I loved how much Lena was trying to put her family first. Every decision she made was with her family in mind, to save her brother, to try and help her dad. And I think that makes for a character that you really root for at the beginning. I'm not saying that you have to start a book and immediately root for the character, but it immediately made me feel for her. And another thing I really loved on top of that is that Lena is an Algaran refugee. Algara is a, I think, distant away land where there has been war, and there is a big refugee population in where this is set. And I think one of my favourite lines that I always talk about, she knew how the Moors viewed the Algarans, uncivilized people who only knew how to wage wars between themselves, a country that only exported refugees. She dreamed of one day translating her mother's Algaran poetry books to show the world that her people knew more about beauty because they had seen so much destruction. That line has really stuck with me long after I finished this book, because this is obviously so reflective of how we view countries like Palestine and Iran and Iraq in the Western world, especially from Western media. And I really like that included in a fantasy book. I feel like I haven't really read any any fantasy book that depicts the refugee experience. So it was really cool to get in here, especially in the gothic fantasy romance space. I suppose it was quite refreshing. This one does have a really good romance. It is one where the two really slowly grow on each other, because at the beginning Lena has such a view of Saint Silas that he is cold and he is hard and he is cruel, and she could never imagine that there would be a softer side to him or any reason for why he is the way he is. And over the course of the book, as they slowly open up to each other, as he is slowly realizing that he can't stop thinking about her, the two realize actually they do have chemistry. Oh my god, it is so slow burn. Like, if you like slow burn with yearning, I think this book will be it for you, because it is just so well done, and we are moving at a snail's pace. Book 2 is going to be really fun, interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing Saint Silas and Lena again. Love their dynamic in this, and I just think Saint Silas is one of my favourite sims from 2026 so far. 5 stars, add it to your TBR, one of my favourite books of this year. I also read A Stage Set for Villains by Shannon J. Span. I gave this book 4.25 stars. I think looking back, it is probably more of a 4-star for me, maybe in a 3.75 space, but I loved how unique the concept for this book was, that the more I thought about it, the more clever I found it, and I could really see and respect the passion that the author has for theatre and how she's woven it into this really beautiful fantasy world. So this is a fantasy that's a standalone, it's one and done. The world in this is called Theatron, and the north and south are divided by this thing called the Cut, which basically has kept these beings called the players of this travelling theatre called the Playhouse out, and it's all really superstitious. The players in this theatre are viewed as like these godlike beings. Our main character Riven had an encounter with someone from the Playhouse when she was really young, which left her cursed, and she's slowly dying because of it. So when an opportunity comes up for her to enter the Playhouse to potentially win one of the spots of the set players and gain their immortality, she takes it. While she's there, she learns about the magic that the players have called craft, which leans into different methods within acting and also different principles in acting. Like, for instance, there's this thing you can do called mimicry, which is where you learn how to actually take over the voice and the face of another person, which, if you actually think of that in an acting setting, it says that it's the art of imitating a person's voice and gestures, but in this book it takes it to the next level. You're actually learning how to become that other person personified. Or there's this technique that you use on stage called suspending your reality, which is when you're acting out a death scene, you need to suspend your reality properly so that you don't die in real life. It was really interesting concepts like that which made me keep turning the page. But one of the things that stopped this being a stellar read for me is that I felt that it was a little bit repetitive in the middle, and also I kind of felt like I was losing interest in the ultimate goal of the story. I think even though the world was so interesting, I almost didn't feel compelled by Riven to keep on the path that she was on. So when she was doing like some little side plot beats, I was just like, nah, let's stick to the main story, Riven. Let's get on with this. Let's keep the story moving. And I also didn't really feel that connection between Riven and Jude is like one of the best players in the Playhouse, and their connection, they kind of had that push-pull connection from very early on, but I didn't think that they had enough interactions for them to really win me over in terms of their chemistry. And so that really meant that later on in the story, when it really should have hit me more emotionally, I didn't really feel it. I also couldn't really imagine anything that was happening near the end. It was so, things were falling, worlds were crumbling, da 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 da, and I was just like, I'm so out of the story right now that I do not like believe any of what's happening right now. I think if you're someone that is super into theatre, super into acting, this could be like your holy grail fantasy book. For me, I haven't really been to the theatre that much, and I don't really know that much about like the concepts and techniques within acting. So I think some of it probably went over my head in terms of like being like, wow, oh my god, this is so smart. Like, I picked up as much as I could from what I knew, but actually if I was like a theatre drama person, person, I probably would have loved this even harder. I feel like the way the story wrapped up was so well done on a technical level, brilliant. I just wish that this one hit me more emotionally like I wanted it to. I think for it to be a standalone as well, I really wanted that whole arc of like satisfaction of going on the story of Riven. But by the epilogue, I was like, I'm not even really sure if I understand what's happening right now on stage. I mean, if you've read this book and you feel like you could tell me, please leave it down in the comments. I read Arvishious O by Annie Davenport. I gave this book 3 stars. I did this one as a buddy read with my friend Steffi, which was really fun to kind of like switch and compare notes, even though I was always constantly on the wrong page because I was like flicking from my Kindle to my Kindle app on my phone, and I didn't have a physical copy, so we were trying to read like 100 pages a day and the page numbers were all not correct, so I was always on the wrong part. I'm so sorry, Steffi. Thank you for powering through it with me. So I went into this one knowing that it was going to be a standalone romantasy, spicy, featuring an all-black cast, and I was like, okay, fab, let's do this. Great. I love a standalone, but I don't feel like this one really stood out for me as being like a very memorable romantasy. I think what this one did really well is that the banter was on point. I loved the tension between these two. They constantly give over into their urges, and the spicy scenes are so great. The atmosphere in those scenes, delicious. What didn't really work for me in this one is that it very much felt lust over romance, and that's how I probably would describe this book. It feels very lustful, and everyone's like super sex positive, body positive, like that was so refreshing in that sense. But I wanted more connection from these two characters, because we get to a certain point in the book, they're saying I love you, and I'm like, what do you mean I love you? 1, don't say I love you in a fantasy book. Please, can we just use something else? 2, do you even really know each other? What do you exactly do know about each other apart from you've gotten together like a few times over the course of the book? The setup of this story is kind of your classic romantasy. We have the princess of a kingdom who's betrothed to the ruler of all kingdoms, and the night before she gets married, she's like, kind of like, F you, I'm gonna have one more night to myself. So she goes to this brothel, and she owns the brothel, but we love that queen, and she has her fun. She doesn't realize that she's got with the royalty from another kingdom. Oh, so when Princess Khadijah gets to this wedding to the Iberian king and then sees King Malachi that she just got with the night before, oh, it's messy, it's messy. That point comes up very quickly in the book, and it was all chaos. So then King Malachi ends up taking Princess Khadijah back to his kingdom, and they basically spend the whole book kind of like you're checking out the politics of the land and also trying to work out what the best way for the future of the kingdom would be. And I think that it wraps up really nicely in this standalone book, so that it didn't need more world building. But I definitely would have liked to have gone to see more of the areas of the world, because it felt quite big and we heard about some of the areas, but we didn't really get to experience them. A lot of this is court life, and I like kind of like a courtly book with political intrigue. I just needed a little bit more world building and a little bit more going on. This book also has really great female friendship dynamics, and that was one of my favorite parts about it. The main character, Princess Khadijah, does have this kind of animal companion that was like some sort of like vague dragon creature called Zaza, and I loved the first mention of this. I was like, I love a bonded animal. I've recently read Bloodbound by Alice Hunter, and obviously it's also in Direbound by Sable Sorensen, Fourth Wing, but I just feel like Zaza was just there as a mode of transportation for the main character. Like, I wanted more scenes of them together. I wanted to know more about their bonds, but this book is already quite long as a standalone, so I don't know, I feel like there could have been some description cut to give more time to some of the relationships in the book, like between Khadijah and Zaza. Between this one and Freeing the Wild by Paisley Hope, I'm realizing that I quite enjoy stories with like the one night stand trope right at the beginning of the book, because it means that the characters know what they're missing after that. Like, even though they can't be together, like they know what they've had at this point, and like they can't stop thinking about it. So this book was really fun. I recommend it as like a good standalone romantasy, but it wasn't that much of a standout to me, and especially because it was quite long, it didn't feel like it was necessarily always worth the page count, if you know what I mean. I think in terms of seeing Faye with an all black cast, I thought that was so refreshing. I want to find more diverse romantasy, to be honest. A lot of the romantasy I read is mostly all white, so if you know any other great diverse romantasy recommendations, let me know. I don't really mean in terms of the fantasy romance space, but like pure romantasy like this one. In March, there were 2 books that I had on my TBR that I didn't get to. They were The Last Starborn Seer by Venetia Constantine and Starside by Alex Astor. So Starside by Alex Astor, I did end up listening to a couple chapters on the audiobook, and I was like, this is really fun, but I haven't got it on my TBR at the moment, so it might be one that I get to in the next couple of months, because I do really like the premise. I've seen everyone talking about hate me harder, harden raker, like that is a line from the book that everyone's going crazy over. The Last Starborn Seer is still on my list for 2026. I got the Fairy Loot edition, it is stunning. I just think that there are some books I want to read more before I go into that one, and especially if I've got like a whole nother year until the sequel's out, I'm not going to be rushing towards it yet, unless someone's like, Sam, you're gonna love this book, read it right now, because I'm so easily swayed. If you give me a good review and you tell me I'm gonna like it, I'll probably read it, but for now I think I'm gonna put it on the back burner and then see how I get on the rest of this year with my other fantasy book. My camera died. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new time to try and film the rest of this video. So I've got all the books I read in April, which I haven't talked about. I did actually forget one from March, which was The Lies That Summon the Night, and I gave this book 3.75 stars. I really like this as a like fun romantasy, super easy to get into, really interesting magic system in this world where art is forbidden, because in the creation of art it has created these like deadly shadow beings. So everyone who creates art is a sinner basically, and if you are an artist, if you are a sinner, then you're sacrificed to these beings called the Sinless, who drink human blood, and essentially like immortals, vampires, that kind of vibe. The main character in this book is a storyteller, and she's got a bounty on her head, so she tries to lay pretty low until Dominic, who's this half sinless man, tracks her down and says, you're gonna work for me or I'm gonna claim the bounty on your head. And what he needs from her is to come along with him on his travels so that she can perform her storytelling and attract the shadows that he requires. So they're kind of just plodding along through this world. You're getting to know more about Inanna's magic as a storyteller, the limits to her magic, what she can do, and you're also learning about the wider world. The twist at the end of this book, insane. It really tips everything you thought you knew about this world on its head, and it's probably one of the main reasons I'm going to pick up season 2 I'm gonna pick up book 2, because even though I wouldn't say this was one of the most standout books in fantasy, I did really enjoy it and have a good time. I was immersive reading this with the audio, the narrators were great, and honestly why I didn't give this book 4 stars is mainly because of the love interest and the romance dynamic. I think the love interest Dominic was quite forgettable. He felt like a cookie cutter cutout is what a cookie cutter cutout, like he felt like, man, like he felt like what am I trying to say? He felt like a mush of like everything you have ever read in a fantasy romance book, and just like put it together, and it made him a shadow daddy, and he's brooding and he's snarky, but like no part of him really felt that unique to me, and so therefore I don't think he'll really stick with me in the long run. Like he's not gonna be one of those book boyfriends I think of again. That might change in book 2. This book was pretty lusty. I think a lot of people say it's insta love. I thought that they had chemistry there. I just think it, like I said, it wasn't the most standout romantasy that I've read. I don't think I've read a super like incredible romantasy in a while, but this was good. Like if you're looking to start somewhere in the romantasy space, I actually would say start with this. This was super easy to get into. I like the writing, I like the characters. This one also made me laugh quite a bit, which I wasn't expecting. But I would actually say this is a good romantasy to start with, especially if you've never read romantasy before. I think overall it's super easy to get into, the world's really unique, and it has compelling characters, so all in all can't complain. So then onto my April reads. I have already chatted about The Well of Ascension, so you know my feelings on that, 5 stars. I read Thistle Marsh by Maria Corrigan, and I really love this book. How I've been describing it is like Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies meets kind of like The Enchanted Greenhouse by Sarah Beth Durst, with a dash of The Cruel Prince, a dash of The Rose Bargain. And what I mean by that is that it's like a cozy fantasy historical setting, and it also also has like fairy magic and twisted bargains all in one. And it follows this main character Mouse, who comes back from the front lines of the First World War. She worked as a nurse and she comes back with her brother who has experienced shell shock and needs a lot of care. Her cousin died during the war, fighting during the war, and she comes back and finds out that her uncle has left her the estate, but the only way that she can keep it is if she does up the entire estate in the span of 30 days, and the whole place needs a lot of work. So when a fairy ends up offering her a bargain to help her do up the estate, she's obviously going to say yes. But the key thing here is that fairies haven't been seen in hundreds of years, and so she's really got to keep on the down low because a lot of people have lost their faith in fairies. So that's kind of the main premise of the story, and then we see Mouse and Thornwood the fairy go about the house, try to fix things up, learn that there's already magical enchantments there, things that they need to unravel and kind of like tackle before they can even like fix the thing, which was really fun and very cool. Just had such a good time reading. What I will say about it though is that even though it's set post World War One, looking back, I don't think the war aspect played that much of a part in it. There was mentions about how people had lost faith in fairies because it's almost like the fairies had abandoned them, and then this war happened, and then even during the war the fairies didn't show up to help. And so I can kind of understand like the hopelessness and how the people felt betrayed by the fairies in that sense. And that would kind of make sense then, that people lost belief in fairies but also had difficult feelings around them too. Actually, I think the story could be taken and put in different points of history and it would still work. I think that the author probably just really liked that time period. I found that I really like stories set in one location. This one also kind of reminded me of Belladonna by Adeline Grace. It's all set in like one manor, and this is all set around one estate, and it has that cozy feel to it because you feel protected in this one setting that you're in. However, I felt like this book was good at leaning into the darker tales of fairies and their trickery and their scheming and their like bad habits almost. I love a twisted fairy bargain. I love magic that comes with a cost. I also really liked in this that it touches on the fact that as we get more developed as a species, we're also losing touch with nature. There's a scene in this where the fairy Thornwood and Mouse, they go to the city and he can't even really function. He can't feel the magic in the ground, and there's like buildings everywhere and it's so hard to find a green space, and he's literally so drained just being there. And I thought, yeah, that makes sense. That is literally how it feels like to be in London, and he can breathe again once they go back out to the countryside. And I think they do address it a little bit in the book to say that like people have adapted, but there is something so freeing and special about being surrounded by nature. And it's interesting because I don't think people realise the impact that it has on you when you're going through the motions and you're living in the city, until you go back out into the countryside in the fresh air and you think, oh my goodness, like that is not a normal way to live. But anyway, I really enjoyed this story overall. I would so recommend it. I think if you're not maybe a cozy fantasy person and you don't like any of the comparison books that I've mentioned, maybe this one isn't for you, but it was certainly for me. Also read The Tricky Business of Fairy Bargains, so kind of along the same vein as Thistle Marsh, like think fairies, think fairy realm. However, this one it follows the main character Poppy, who when she was really young she got taken, I think she lived in like the 1800s. She gets taken to the fairy realm and she grows up there, and then when it's finally time for her to come back, or she gets brought back to the human realm, hundreds of years have passed in the human world. And basically, to assimilate and get used to the modern world, the government places you with like a law firm and you help them go through fairy bargains to find loopholes within them that could put humans at risk. So that's what our main character Poppy's doing. She's working in this law firm, and I was like, I love this premise. So it starts to get going when our main character Poppy makes an error in a contract, and the client that she's looking after gets taken to the fairy realm. She has to go in to help find her and bring her back, but also while she's there sees all the people that she used to know and she used to grow up with, and gets all mixed up in like the politics going on there. This is such a tricky one. This is a tricky one because I did enjoy the first 100 pages, but it's almost like I wasn't expecting this to lean more into being an adventure book in the fairy realm. I wanted more from the legal setting. I really liked kind of like going through the contracts at the beginning and her looking through trying to find loopholes. So when she actually had to go on a quest in the fairy realm to get back this person, I was like, I'm not feeling this, like, get back to work maybe. I did like learning about the fairy realms, but I think what kind of removed me from getting invested is when she met all of these people she used to know, like the friend that she grew up with and the person she was in love with, because she's had all those prior relationships from before the story starts, and I don't necessarily think that those relationships were introduced to us very well. I didn't feel attached to Poppy's relationships with anyone, and I didn't feel invested in the side characters. I was like, I don't know you. So I think that affected how much I could like enjoy the adventure side of this story, because I just wasn't invested in any of Poppy's relationship. The romance also wasn't really there for me. Like I mentioned, she has a relationship with someone off page from before the book that you get to meet in this one again when they're reunited, and I was like, not feeling the spark. This actually feels pretty, I don't think you have chemistry. I don't know how you were ever together. There was a setup for maybe a different romantic storyline to be happening, but then it didn't commit to it, and so I thought, is it a love triangle, is it not a love triangle? So you had so much chemistry with that other person, now it's not going anywhere. I thought that the court politics side was interesting. I just wasn't that engaged with it. So I think the first 100 pages, great. I also thought that the descriptions of food in this were like delicious. I just think overall as a story, I don't normally like give such a lukewarm review, but this wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and I think that made me really sad because I was really expecting to love this. So I gave this one 3 stars. There were parts about it I really enjoyed, parts about it that I think Wit could have been a lot better, but maybe I would try the sequel to see where it goes next. It's just a shame, I think, because the premise sounded so cool. Then I read, I've got The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood. This was such a delight. I gave this book 4.25 stars. This is perfect if you ever watched Angus Thongs and Perfect Snogging back in the day. Georgia Nicholson. Oh, what they call the stiff villains. That fire you ignited, good, bad, and undecided, burns when I stand beside it. Your light is ultraviolet vision, so insane, traveling and reveling through my brain. Ultraviolet. They need to put that song in the adaptation of this. Anyway, coming back, this to me is like one of the most perfect British rom-com books. I laughed so much reading this. I had so much fun with the main character. Delphi is such a little silly sausage. So at the beginning of this book, you meet her. She's not that happy in her life. She doesn't have too many friends or that much going on, and she chokes to death. It was actually quite like a vivid choking scene. Like if you've read Yellow Face by R.F. Kuang, that also starts off with a choking scene. And side note, last year I was eating pork belly in the kitchen, and I was standing up, I was eating it, and then, you know, pork belly is like meat and fat, and the fat kind of like slipped down my throat while I was chewing, and then I was choking. And this is kind of a traumatic story for me, but it's funny to like look back on. But I think I almost died when I was eating that pork belly. So I can actually see how it would happen to this character. I remember just like no one else was at home with me, and that was the scariest thing. And I was coughing and coughing and coughing, and then trying to like grab water, but I could feel myself losing air. Oh my god, it was literally so scary. That's what happens to the character. So she gets to the afterlife, and so this lovely pixie-like lady greets her, and she's like, oh, I've been setting up this matchmaking service in the afterlife so you can meet like your soulmate. And she meets her soulmate. She's also died. Yippee, they get to spend the afterlife together. They have instant chemistry, but turns out there was something that went wrong, and this person wasn't meant to die. Jonah wasn't meant to die, so he gets sent back to Earth, and Delphi's like, you can't just do that to me. You can't just like rip away the potential love of my life. Can you please send me back down to Earth for a period of time so I can find him again? The person in the afterlife is like, okay, yeah, let's do that. You've got 10 days to make him fall in love with you or give you a kiss or something like that, and if you do it, you can stay in the real world. Like, what a fun premise. But the catch is that Jonah doesn't remember their interaction. So Delphi goes back to her old life and then has to try and like 1, track Jonah down, 2, find a way to meet him in a non-creepy way, and 3, try and make him kiss her. And she does this all with the help of someone who's living in her apartment block. I'll leave it there. It was just such a fun book. I can see this being like an excellent film. I laughed, I teared up for her, and ultimately I loved the whole second chance of it all. She was really in a place where she didn't think that she had that much in her life. Through this process happening, she realized that actually there are so many connections to be made with the people around you if you only open your heart to it. And I thought that was really special. I really love this, and I can't wait to read more from this author. I know there's another book coming out from her. It's called Romantic Hero, coming out in June, so I'm going to read that immediately. I also read Bloodbound by Alice Hunter. So this book is out in May. When you see this, I think it might already be out. lot. This is one of my favourite fantasy romance books that I've read of the year. I haven't read too many, but I really love this one. I thought that it was so refreshing, but it also took every part of fantasy that I usually really like. In this world there are these two kingdoms separated, and the heirs have to both fight to the death, and whoever wins will win the access to this pool of magic called the heart. And the heart is like an energy source that they can use for like electricity. And our two main characters are Astrid and Skylar. They both represent two different kingdoms. Astrid is the heir of this witch kingdom, so they've got animal familiars, she can brew potions and perform magic. And then we have Skylar from the other kingdom, and this kingdom have people called blooded who have supernatural powers. The nobility, like the king, queen, prince, princesses of this kingdom, also can bond to dragons, and they have like that fourth wing kind of like telepathic link. So the two have to do these trials, right? Which already I'm like, trials, I'm a bit sick of trials. But I love how it was done here, because the trials don't happen immediately. We know that the trials are coming, but Skylar and Astrid throughout that time become closer and closer as friends, because the two of them have been through quite a lot in their lives, and on a level they offer each other a lot of comfort in a female friendship kind of way. So I think that was the most standout part of the book for me, because I was so invested in their friendship. Like, I loved every single scene where one of them would back up the other, and throughout the book you're like, you feel the looming of this trial, and you know that one of them's gonna have to kill the other, and that conflict I think was just like, oh, so emotionally satisfying, because you're like, what are you going to do? Like, one of you is gonna have to kill the other, even though you've become like sisters. I thought that that was such an interesting like scenario to be placed in. So then we're on to the romance. We've got Astrid and Zirian. It's like Ryan with a Z in the front. That's how I remember it. And oh my god, I love them. I think their romance really crept up on me in terms of like how much I loved it, because I was like, oh, just another man, like he's just another bookish man. But no, he's not just the bookish man. I loved him. Skylar has her own romantic love story, but like I don't want to say too much on that one because it was actually really juicy, and I'm really excited to see how book 2 goes. I think going into this story, if you just know that it's very like female friendship driven, there's some great romance like sidelines. I really like the found family in this. I love the animal familiars. The ending is so twisty, like so twisty. I teared up multiple times reading this book. It was making me extremely stressed. I loved it, would wholeheartedly recommend. I gave this book 4.5, but actually I've just been saying in all my reviews like it's a 5. It's a 5. Sorry, I had such a good time. It's 5 stars. And we've got Broken Dove by Danny Francis. I gave this book 4.25 stars. I think if you liked Silver Elite, then you're gonna enjoy this one. Like, absolutely, you just will. This one's an interesting one because I gave Silver Elite 5 stars. If you know me, that was one of my favorite books of 2025. This one I think just didn't quite have the magic of the first book, but I still really liked it. It goes into much more kind of detail of how the resistance was formed, the motives of the resistance, like the work that they've been doing, how our main character Ren links into it all, and we're really seeing her try to navigate her place in the resistance after what she learns at the end of Silver Elite, which is pretty big information and could really jeopardize her place within the resistance. And while she's also here, she meets up with someone that she used to know, and they have great chemistry, and so it turns into a bit of a love triangle. I was saying on TikTok like, oh, I don't know if people enjoy this, but it's a love triangle, it might be a love-hate situation, but everyone that commented said they love a love triangle, so maybe like love triangles aren't as unpopular as I thought. But it's an interesting one because Ren and Cross, who was the main love interest of the first book, are separated throughout a lot of this. Yeah, I really switched sides. I was like, Cross who? Cross freaking who? Please just get with this other guy of the love triangle. All that to say, this had an insane ending. I think the last 150 pages, it was just action non-stop, reveal non-stop, plot twist non-stop. I can't wait to read book 3. I'll be really looking forward to that. I think that after the ending of this book, book 3 is going to be extremely messy on like a relationship level, character level. Oh, I can't wait, it's gonna be brilliant. Then I kind of finished both of these off at the beginning of May, but I'll include them in here. So I read Andromeda by E.S. MacLeod. This is a reimagining of Princess Andromeda's story. I think in a lot of depictions in history she is depicted as a white woman, and I think the author E.S. MacLeod wanted to reclaim the story of Andromeda as a black woman, as the princess of Ethiopia, and do the reimagining of her story from that perspective. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4.25 stars. I couldn't put it down. I really loved the writing. I thought it was lush. I thought that it was so consuming. I really felt the atmosphere of being in this setting. She explores the idea of beauty, the perception of beauty, our main character Princess Andromeda, and how her beauty is used to define her value. It's used by everyone around her, and how that affects her as she's growing up, and also as she realizes that actually she has been defined by that and she is so much more than just her beauty. There's a sapphic love story in here that I really enjoyed, which is with a character called Ceto, who is sent to guard her by Poseidon and watch over Andromeda until she has her first bleed, and then Ceto has to declare to Poseidon whether Andromeda is actually the most beautiful person of the land. Because I don't know any of the original source material, I really didn't know where this was going, but I think you might have a different experience if you're familiar with the Greek mythology around Princess Andromeda. And also Perseus, I think. I didn't even know that much about Perseus. I knew a bit more about Perseus than I did about Andromeda, but I was still pretty clueless. I don't read that many Greek reimaginings, but I really enjoyed this. I think in passing, if you've enjoyed things like Song of Achilles and Circe, then I think you should give this a go, because I thought it was brilliant. I also decided to pick up Every Summer After by Carley Fortune, because her new book Our Perfect Storm was coming out in May, and I was like, oh, I've never read a Carley Fortune book and I really want to. So I thought, let me go back, let me read the ancient text. So I read Every Summer After and I loved it. It was like the perfect blend of The Summer I Turned Pretty meets People We Meet on Vacation, because it has the element of like going back in time, seeing these characters from when they were so young and their summers together, their relationship as friends, and how that really evolved over time. And then we also get present day, where you know that they haven't spoken in 12 years and if like a horrible circumstance brings them together, and the story just unfolds so tantalizingly slowly that I could not put this book down, because I needed so badly to know what had happened to them, but I so badly also needed to know that they were going to be happy. One thing that exudes from this book is the nostalgia of summer, and I read My Friends by Frederick Backman, and that was also one of the main feelings that I got from that book. This book made me want to go to Barry's Bay, it made me want to get a yellow boat, it made me want to be hanging out on the lake, it made me want to go to the pierogi restaurant. I can't wait to see that. I'm literally like this. Take me there. I am really excited for the Prime adaptation, which is coming out in June. I think the casting looks really good, and fingers crossed they will do Charlie's story as well, which is Sam's brother in One Golden Summer. I'm hoping that they do both of those. I am just really excited to see it on screen, and I know this is gonna make me want to like uplift my whole life, and uproot, sorry, not uplift. My life needs uplifting, but I will want to uproot my whole life to live in Barry's Bay. I had that same feeling as well when I watched The Summer I Turned Pretty, when I saw them in Cousins, and you know, they live in that massive house that leads onto the beach. My dream, my absolute dream. Last but not least is The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow. This was my first ever book by Alex E. Harrow, and I can't believe I waited so long to pick this up. I loved it. I think if you have the opportunity to use the audiobook as well to immersive read this, definitely do it, because the narrator for Owen Mallory, the main character, is brilliant. I thought he was so funny, and he just brought so much life and so much humor into Owen's character that when I wasn't using the audiobook, I was like, nah, let me listen to this man again, because he's hilarious. This was a very clever story, and I love a love story that spans lifetimes and timelines, kind of like Loki, if you've ever watched the Marvel TV show, or if you've ever watched Marvel in general. So the premise is that Owen Mallory is obsessed with the legend of Una Everlasting. Like, he loves this figure, and she has been a big influence in a lot of parts of his life, and he can't explain it, but she always shows up when he needs him. And so he's also a scholar and looks into the legends of Una. And when one day he finds the original source material of the person who was traveling with Una Everlasting thousands of years ago back in the day, and he starts to try and translate it. Something intervenes and he actually goes all the way back in time and gets to meet her, and turns out that he is the one who wrote the book. He's the one who wrote the legends, and he follows her, he writes it all down, and he then, I don't want to say too much, he kind of helps put her on track to where she's meant to be, because obviously he knows her whole legend, and he meets her like halfway through her story and he's like, no, you can't be down, like you need to keep going, like the world is going to be telling legends about you and all these stories and you've got to like stay on course. So he almost picks her up when she's at her lowest. They're both going to realize that they are part of something so much bigger than themselves. Throughout these lifetimes of him going back and seeing her, they have such a beautiful love story. From Owen's point of view, this book feels like a love letter to Una, and Una has chapters and now those also feel like love letters to Owen. And I think it's just such a beautifully told story that I've not ever read anything like this or immersed in it the way I was. I really felt like I was in the middle of a love story, if you know what I mean. Like I was between both of them talking to each other through these entries. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I kind of wanted a little bit more time with them. This book is quite short, it's like 300-ish pages and it achieves a lot in those 300 pages, but I wanted a bit more time with them to really get to linger in their moments together and see their chemistry build, because they have something from the get-go, and I just think for me, like I just need time to warm up to it all. I also think this book could have hit me harder emotionally if I had that extra time with them, because there were points in this where I was like, oh my god, like I know I would have cried like at this bit if I just like felt a little bit more for them. Not to say I didn't feel for them, but like I just needed a teeny bit more time to get on board with like their everlasting love. But I would so recommend this. I think if you're someone who's like loving the night thing at the moment, there just seems to be knights in fantasy everywhere, this is brilliant. I think Alex E. Harrow is so talented and I can't wait to read more of her books. So that is everything I read in March and April. Let me know what you guys have been reading. Let me know if you've read any of these books, if you had some of the same feelings as I did. I will see you very, very soon in another video, and in the meantime you can catch me on Instagram, TikTok, Goodreads. Goodbye my lovelies.